Good afternoon, everybody from Brussels, and welcome to our webinar on digitally enhanced learning and teaching at European higher education institutions. Before we start, I think my colleague will give us some instructions about the webinar.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. I will briefly go through some technical features with you. During this webinar, you have 3 ways of interacting with us. On the right side, you will find 3 tabs: chat, Q&A, and polls. The chat tab is the one that you can use for greetings, technical question, or any other comments you might have about the webinar content. Then there's the Q&A. If you have any content-related question, here you can use the Q&A tab. You can ask your question to speakers. This is a moderated box, so there's a colleague of ours who's going through all your questions and publishing the most relevant one. You can also vote the questions that you think they are most relevant, and these will appear on top and will be asked to the presenters. The polls section is after one, is the next one. Here you're going to see a pop-up window when we're going to launch the poll. I will ask you to either answer the poll or click on answer later, so this pop-up disappears. And then once we close the poll, you can see the results under the tab closed under polls. Finally, there's the Handouts section. There you can find the report and another link that could be useful for you for the LNT forum that is upcoming. And you can download the report from that section. One last thing before concluding this overview: the webinar is recorded. You will receive a post-event email with the link to the recording after the event. This concludes my technical briefing. Enjoy the webinar, and over to you, Michael.
Thanks so much, Chiara. And probably we start with that I tell you a bit about the background of this report, the report on digitally enhanced learning at higher education institutions that we present here today. And on the occasion, I will also introduce then our panel here. So it has been developed under the DIGI-HE project, which is a 3-year project from January to December 2022. And the purpose is actually to support self-reflection on digitally enhanced learning and teaching, which we abbreviate DELT, at institutions. And we also try to support the development or enhancement of strategic approaches and capacity building. When I say we, it's of course the European University Association, the EUA, but as you can see here, we do that together with 4 institutional partner institutions from across Europe. And that's probably the moment when I can introduce Ulf, who is from the Baden-Württemberg Corporate State University. And as you can see, we have some associated partners, among them EDEN, the European Distance and E-Learning Network. And I have here with me Sandra Kuchina-Sovcic, who is currently the president of EDEN. And she plays also with another hat an important role at Zagreb University. In addition, I'm joined by Alistair Creelman from Linnaeus University, who sits on our advisory board. And I should probably also mention that Ulf, and not only Sandra, but also Ulf and Alistair play important roles. They are very active in EDEN, and I'm sure you have seen them on some other occasion in this function. So thanks to you for joining us here, and I will present now some results of the report that have been made accessible to you. We will just focus on a few findings and then really try to engage into a conversation on that to find out what that actually means. What is the situation in different parts of Europe, and how do we see the future evolving from here? So to give you an idea about what the survey is about and what it covered is we conducted it on a basis of a survey questionnaire, an online questionnaire to institutional leadership. So we sent that round to universities and got, as you can see, more than 300 responses. They came actually mainly from universities, but there are also some technical colleges, there are some open universities, music and art schools, medical schools. So it's a bit a diverse group of institutions which answered, and that was also the purpose. And the data collection took actually place in the period from April to June 2020. And as you all know, that was exactly the period when the COVID crisis started across Europe. And I think if we look back in history, that was probably the last moment where you could get credible data on the status before the crisis from institutions. By now, it would probably be difficult to remember how it was before and how it is now. We asked institutions deliberately to report the status before and had some extra questions reserved then in which they could report on what measures they had taken due to the crisis. It is not the first time, as you can see, we got answers from across Europe, and I think it's probably the only survey that covers on digitally enhanced learning what was at the time the entire European higher education area of 48 countries. It is not the first time that we conduct such a survey. We had already one in 2014, the first one, and then occasionally we raised some questions about digitally enhanced learning in our more regular trends reports. So this is the reason why we can also show some longitudinal data. I start with the most obvious one: how's digitally enhanced learning and teaching actually provided? And that's probably no big surprise that blended learning continues to be, before the crisis, the most common way for institutions to provide digitally enhanced learning. It's 75% across Europe, but if you look at some individual countries, there we can see that practically all the universities provide it, such as in Austria, Belgium, Finland, Netherlands, Sweden, Switzerland. What was interesting, and I just mention it here, maybe we get back to that later on in the discussion, while we conducted this survey, the issue of hybrid learning came up as a, I would say, more sophisticated, probably more holistic way of approaching digitally enhanced learning. So not so much focusing on off and off campus, but having a kind of more comprehensive approach towards student learning. And I picked up a little drawing here from the internet, which illustrates what it did now in the period of the crisis from February, when it was still on campus, to March, when we moved all to distance and blended, and then later on in the autumn, I don't know if that actually happened at all institutions, but where you can see there is much more flexibility in there between students studying on campus and students following it off campus at the same time. And we have seen that there is a discussion not only related now to the COVID crisis and how we get best through this, but I think also beyond how the future of digitally or how the future of learning and teaching, I should better say, how the future of learning and teaching will look like beyond the crisis. We asked institutions on online degree courses. Again, this is an old question. We had it already in 2014. I can say there hasn't been a big change, about the same number, but as you can see, there are considerable differences across Europe. So in average, it's about 1/3 of institutions that offers usually some few degree online courses, but in some countries, or in particular in the whole Northern European region, it's considerably higher. MOOCs were pretty new in 2014, and there we have seen an increase compared to 6 years ago. And what is, I think, also interesting, we can see that they are probably used in a more targeted way, and also that recognition of MOOC learning has slightly improved. A question that we asked for the first time now is the one about short courses. We knew that there was increasing interest on short courses, and you're all aware that it has been under the title micro-credentials. There is increasing policy interest also at European levels and various national levels. But we had never actually asked institutions on whether, on how many short courses they actually had. And as you can see here, it's about half of the institutions which indicate that they have them as online courses, and that makes them the most frequent type of online provision. Not only the number of institutions that offer them, but also that when you ask them how many you offer, how many do you offer, you will find that they offer much more short courses than, for example, MOOCs or online degree courses. So an interesting phenomenon, which until recently didn't get too much attention. Summing this all up, institutions indicated also that about a bit more than half of them, 57%, said that they use actually digitally enhanced learning in one way or the other across the institution. If I compare that to 2014, we can see a slight increase there. So it's becoming a bit more common and a bit more mainstreamed. We also asked about impact, and they got a long list from us of 8-9 different options, and what you see featured here is the top 3, so on which we had the most agreement. So it's close to 90%, which says it innovates learning and teaching. So it helps to innovate pedagogical approaches, explore new ways of teaching, and this is, by the way, also was already quite visible in 2014. The second point that is made here is the flexible provision, which 3/4 of institutions agree on. Provision for students on and off campus, and of course also for teachers. And then the third point of agreement is data on student learning, which institutions find helpful to better understand how students learn, and also to monitor student learning and to support them better. On various other questions, we could conclude that it is mainly seen quite positively. As you can see here, 80% say it brings benefit to the student experience. Another 70% also states that students have a positive attitude towards it. And also, this is a bit lower, 60% say that staff have a positive attitude towards it. So we can debate now if that is a lot or little. I remind you, we collected the data between April and June 2020. So if 40% of institutions say that staff does not have a positive attitude towards it, is at least a considerable number. But nevertheless. Another thing that turned out much clearer than back in 2014 are the actual purposes for digitally enhanced learning. I think back in 2014, we had the feeling this is very experimental. You do it because it's technically possible, but that institutions were not so sure about the purpose. And I think that has changed. Asking them specifically about lifelong learning. So this is clearly used to target mature and adult students, 65%. And beyond also, as you can see, institutions, more than 80% of institutions have widening access and participation as a strategic development priority. And about half of them, 48%, also believe that this has contributed to major transformation in access and participation. So they see clearly a positive benefit there. And the third purpose that I want to refer to here is internationalization. there we asked institutions, how, looking back 5 years, how was the what did you experience over the past 5 years, and how do you see the future? And as you can see, looking back, 64% make the point that it actually helped to transform interinstitutional collaboration, and also more than 50% to enhance outreach to international students. And if you then look at the prognosis 5 years ahead, they are quite optimistic that it will even do more in the future. Concrete point was virtual mobility, also a new question where about 1/4 of institutions had that in place. But also here, 35% are actually set, an additional 35%, I should say, are set to explore that in the future. I think this is where I stop here and turn to my panel, and I start probably with Sandra. I mean, looking at the composition there on how institutions provide blended but also online education, is that something that you see reflected at your institution?
Yeah, thank you, Michael. I would say that it depends on universities, on institutions. We still have in Europe lots of campus-based universities, dominantly teaching face-to-face, and where the online possibility is something which is good, but not compulsory. So I would say that from the last survey, which you did in 2014, many universities realized that the benefits of the possibilities of digital technologies and started implementing them. Also, universities go through reaccreditation process. And when you have reaccreditation, then you have to, when you have external experts as well. And usually I know because I'm supporting higher education institutions in Croatia in e-learning, usually institutions comes to me and say, okay, we have to do a reaccreditation. Can you help us in the use of digital technologies and to implement them in the study programs and curricula? So till 2020, it was much more on the voluntary base, and it was not that teachers didn't have positive attitude. I did myself some kind of some research regarding the University of Zagreb and universities in Croatia, and teachers do have positive attitude. But the issue which I came to is that when management do not have positive attitude, then the teacher positive attitude is getting lower. If they have the positive attitude of management, then it's working well. The technical issues are not very important, but the management attitude can very much influence teachers in their positive attitude. So this is from me just shortly.
Thanks so much. So you say there has to be somehow a conducive framework for it, and that might not be given everywhere. Yeah. I think that's an important point. I mean, on the lifelong learning, on the online learning, it's probably not too surprising that we don't see a major increase there, because that's probably one of the immediate lessons learned from the COVID crisis. I mean, institutions don't want to be, and nobody wants institutions to become online learning institutions. Everybody is burning to get back to campus, both students and teachers. So probably it's probably staying like this, that we will have 1/3 of institutions which use some online degree programs for very specific purposes. But then, as I pointed out, there are also these short courses and MOOCs which offer very flexible learning. Is that something that you see is going to where you see a major progress compared to some years ago? I probably addressed that towards Alistair. We made here the point of lifelong learning and also of widening access and participation, which I think wasn't really so strongly there back in 2014.
No, thanks. This is a massive area, really, because if you look at the demand for higher education around the world, it is very, very much in the sort of bracket of outside the traditional student age group. And it's people like us and like much of our audience who want professional development, who are trying to change jobs. Restructuring is going on all over the world. There are unemployment issues. There are new businesses being built up, new paradigms, really, to use that often used word. The question is that I think a lot of universities will have to take new positions. Do we want to follow that market? Do we want to get a niche in lifelong learning, in professional development courses, in helping people to deal with a new labor market and so on? Or do we want to remain a high status campus university? Some will stay with a campus because that's their trademark, that's their brand. But I think others need to change, and the online area is central to that. We have a lot of open universities around the world who are already addressing this and doing it very, very well. I think any universities who want to move into this area need to look at finding sort of alternative support structures in communities, because it's not enough for many of these people just to be given online resources and do-it-yourself guides. They may need guidance on site somewhere. A lot of open universities have centers around the country, learning centers. Libraries can help out as well, but we need more of a sort of broader infrastructure to help adults retrain, to find these educational opportunities and to support them. And it's not just online. It's really important to have somebody locally you can go along and ask a question, because even the most digital of us need a friendly face to speak to and somewhere where we can get help. So I think we're going to need new partnerships and new structures to support this.
So that's really a strategic decision then, because I guess for many institutions, the question would not be either or, but on whether they do that in addition to educating, I would say, the traditional school leaver cohorts that go still to institution and want a bachelor degree in 3 or 4 years. How does that look from your perspective, Ulf?
Hi. I think that it's we have to recognize that when it comes to digital technology and higher education, you can serve your normal target groups and you can serve new target groups, new markets. And it's indeed, as you said, a decision what you want to do. I would also like to think about one thing which you asked before, that is on the point of blended learning. I think that what we can see in higher education around Europe is that, of course, now everybody is moving to online, and within the last 5 years, we have seen more and more blended learning as the standard model. But when I look ahead now, I expect that we are going to transition from what I call the blended learning model 1.0, which was primarily resource-oriented, giving students resources, in addition to the classroom, to deepen their knowledge on certain aspects, to blended learning 2.0 model, because we have, through the COVID crisis now, by force actually, learned better how to deal with technologies. And I expect that in the blended learning 2.0 phase, we will deal much more in a much more refined way with engaging students into learning processes, which is not so much only resource-based, but which will also cover more the interactive parts of learning.
I think that's probably what I tried to allude to when I mentioned hybrid or high-fly education. I don't know if that is commonly used across Europe. We found actually out in some parts of Southern Europe, when you use hybrid, it's the same as blended. But I think there is a kind of development where people make a distinction between blended, as you said, very much resource focused on and off campus, and a more integrated way to provide education. Is that something that you see discussed? I mean, is that a discussion that you have at Eden? Is that something that you discuss at your institutional or national levels as well? Alistair, oh, sorry, I have Sandra first and then Alistair.
Thank you. Well, definitely, I have been doing recently number of lectures trying to explain to teachers what is blended learning, what is hybrid learning, what is online education. This is different issues, but we use these terms actually thinking about different things and thinking that everyone thinks the same as we are, but these are not the same things. I would say that blended learning, as Ulf said, is becoming standard because we have to integrate digital technologies because we have integrated them in the everyday life. We cannot omit the education from digital technologies. It will be stupid. But definitely we are doing that in small steps. What I think here is a problem is that the courses that the many universities are accredited for face-to-face teaching and learning, and to move to mode which is much more enriched with digital technologies, let's say 50%, you have to reaccreditate your course. And this is a big step. And I'm not certain that many universities will rush into it. It takes time. And as you said, Michael, at the beginning, definitely a number of people will look at the possibilities to go back to the way before the pandemic because it's the easier way. And everything else needs a lot of efforts. Within the Eden, we tried to encourage and to group the number of educators to share expertise and opinions, how to do things, how can we ensure the quality of teaching and learning. But definitely we can, as Eden, just help and be here for support and sharing the know-how. But what I think at this moment is not an issue how much digital technologies are present into education, but how to ensure the quality of education. Because at the moment we have lots of things and many of them are not of high quality.
Okay. Thanks. We get to quality assurance in a minute. Alistair, you also wanted to react.
Yeah, I mean, sorry. Blended, hybrid, there's even this new term, high flex. It's very confusing, as Sandra said. I think a lot of both management and teachers are confused. Students are confused. We're confused. We tend to put a lot, we have lots of names in this business, and we're never quite sure on the exact definitions. For instance, I think blended learning is often seen as just this polarized online or on-site, one or the other. I would say it also includes other blends like synchronous, asynchronous, different blends of pedagogical approaches, different forms of means of communication, and so on. So that blend can be more like a mixer board. But one interesting thing that happened in the autumn here, I think, well, most places, at the end of the summer, we got a false sense of security. The virus is disappearing. How nice. Let's go back to campus again. And a lot of people, we rushed back to campus, and the students came along, or some of them did, but some of them stayed at home, and some of them weren't sure, and they were coming and going. And we had a lot of hybrid sessions. And that, I'll make it very short, actually. The biggest problem here is doing that very well. That, if you take everybody on Zoom, then it's great. You can do a lot of good stuff. If you have everybody in the room, that's good as well. But if you have some on Zoom and some in the classroom, it's messy. And our classrooms are not equipped for good hybrid teaching. In fact, even we have a modern campus and very few rooms are actually equipped for this, because everyone needs to see everyone needs to hear everyone has to be aware of everyone. And we have to make sure that distance students are not discriminated as a B team who are just spectators, a fly on the wall watching a discussion in a room. That's not interesting. That's not quality. And to do it right, we need cameras, plural, microphones, plural. We need screens, plural, in the rooms, and maybe even a technician to coordinate. It's complicated.
Mm-hmm. No, indeed. Yes. And I think that has to be emphasized also, as there are calls that institutions should become more flexible and leave it basically to the students to decide on a daily basis on how he or she wants to attend in classroom or online. That is also a resource issue, of course, and has to do with funding. One aspect here, probably on the lifelong learning and also on what you mentioned before, Alistair, institutions have to move up. We have a lot of discussion these days about micro-credentials. I know they might not be what people imagine under micro-credentials, might not be synonymous with what we found as short courses, but I mean, it's probably something that will be more explored. What we also found is that that there's actually much more interest in short courses, which are, or more institutions provide short courses that are not only online, but which are blended actually. So do what you actually mentioned, that there is not just something content put online, but that there is also some physical interaction. There is a kind of institution, there are real people, there are real premises where learners can still go. Do you see that as something really taken forward? I mean, how do you in your surroundings react to this plan now that is also emphasized by the European Commission and also in the Bologna process now to promote and develop micro-credentials?
If we take turns, then it would be me.
So it's you.
I think it's an important point. What we can see around Europe is that micro-credentials or alternative certification forms are taking up in those countries, member states, where the legislation is the Higher Education Legal Act is actually allowing this kind of stacking different credentials together. In Germany, we do not see so much uptake of that. Our higher education system is currently still oriented quite a lot in the first and second cycle, at least, to the standard bachelor and master provision, and also one campus oriented. We have just published a study, and it's called Future Skills, Future Higher Education. And in the study, we have tried to ask experts about the main drivers of higher education in the future. And there are two drivers which we started to discuss here also, and which are in the survey, which might give micro-credentials a new role in the future. And it is emerging now. It is, as you can see in the survey in Ireland, 50% of institutions are already giving or dealing with this kind of credentialing. But the two drivers are really the new emphasis on a lifelong academic, higher academic learning provision, which, by the way, we use this term often, light-hearted, but which, given the demographic shifts which we are having and the technological development and the new work movements on the labor market, we probably will come to a situation in which in 10, 15 years, the first and second cycle academic education is going to be reduced in importance against the lifelong learning, episodical academic education on top of that. And that will only be possible if we create a system where seamless course provision from university to their then adult grown-up professional students can take place, and where suitable credentials are also given for short courses, longer courses. The second big driver is the driver which we can see in the what we call the individual networked institutional pathways. That means that education through online provision will not just be coming from one provider to one student, but that students are selecting from different providers, maybe in the future even more from different countries, from different providers. And these two drivers, which we clearly could see in the study, will probably lead to an uptake of this right now actually emerging issue, which, by the way, the Commission is already dealing with since, I think, 3-4 years now, through projects and through task forces in which these systems are structured and also aligned with the qualification frameworks. That's starting now. It's not yet finished.
Thanks. Moving to internationalization now. I mean, you see the results here. Any reflection on that? I remember some years ago, we looked on internationalization strategies at EUA, and we found out that, strangely, while digitally enhanced learning and teaching was emerging, and there was much more transnational learning and teaching activities, most strategies didn't really consider digital as a means. So you may have institutions which had a strategy for digital, and you may have institutions which had, and most institutions developed strategies for internationalization, but there was no really, cross-referencing on this. Any thoughts on that? No. Yep, Alistair.
This is a great big area, and it's very sensitive as well, because at the moment, virtual mobility and sort of virtual exchange is the only game in town. Physical mobility is simply not possible. What's more, not to try not to be too negative on the fact, but the carbon footprint of higher education is enormous. It is absolutely gigantic, and we all love traveling and we all love meeting each other, but we can't go on meeting like this. Physical student mobility benefits 5% of the student population. That's a rough figure. I'm sure I can get better figures for you, but it's in that vicinity. It's a minority who actually benefit from it. I think it's a wonderful thing. It is absolutely great experience, of course. But what about the other 95%? And how much international experience do they get? I think virtual mobility and exchange is the way forward. And I think even physical exchange is going to become increasingly difficult to do with a clear conscience if we are thinking about the environmental and sustainability issues that we have ahead of us. It's terrible to say that, because we've all enjoyed it and loved it, but harsh realities are going to kick in. And I think this is going to be really something we have to investigate much more.
Okay, that's of course also another issue that is on the European but also on the national agendas. I mean, the greening aspect, and we will see how that evolves when we are able to travel again. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, Sandra.
Alistair has a good point. Virtual mobility was present before, but the physical mobility was much more attractive, and definitely it contributes. So you get another perspective as well when you're physically present somewhere. But we have to work much more on the credential, because I know, for example, when Erasmus students go to some other countries for semester, the ECT points are always somehow a problem in a way. It's not easy to get acquainted one with another, and that can be difficult for students. But what I see as a good initiative from European Commission is this initiative of collision of universities, which is going on, and I know it's the second call that has already been on, where the universities are getting together in order to ensure the possibility of this virtual mobility between institutions, so that students do not have any other problem regarding taking the class at one university and then the class at another university, and also the issue of digital academic card is coming much more to be actual and is developing. So we are going into this direction, but actually it's taking the small steps.
Yeah, and Ulf.
Yeah, always when Alistair and Sandra are speaking, I'm so inspired then that I want to add a point. In fact, with my working group, we have just started a small project with the higher education institution, one in the north of Germany, which is the institution with most international students on ratio. They have 102 nationalities on campus. That's really impressive. And what they want to do is they want to build what they call an international e-learning center. And the obvious reason for that is they want to be able now, of course, in the pandemic, but also in normal operation mode, to have a possibility, to build a specific possibility to keep contact with their students, not only when they are in Germany, but also when they are at home for sometimes over Christmas or for 3 months next year or whatever, So, but then when we went along this concept and developed that a bit further, we were actually asking ourselves the question, so what can we all do to use digital technology to provide an international experience at home, so to speak, also to the students? And that's not so easy. And the reason for it is we have fantasies about that. We can do that. We think if we are starting to collaborate, that's going to work with other students, with other experts, doing international projects with the students, with other universities and so on. That's all happening. But it requires, in fact, this internationalization at home to build, so to speak, to support the development of the future global citizen. It requires really to change curricula and teaching modes. And that's, again, the culture thing, which we have in higher education, which takes a long time and really needs support of the teachers to understand how they can walk, so to speak, with the students along this competence pathway.
Okay, thanks so much. So something to be explored. Also, as you may have seen, it is clearly mentioned in the last Bologna communique, which promises an international experience for all students, so 100%, which is quite ambitious. And it's also on the agenda of the European University Initiatives, which have to get half of their students mobile, and they cannot all go physically, clearly. I'm moving on. As Sandra mentioned already, the institutional approach and how important that is for the classroom, that the management goes ahead. And I mean, here it looks actually, from our side, what we found actually quite good. If you see strategies are increased, we had 63% in 2014. They are now 88%. I think we can also have seen that there is a move towards more institutional, so strategies for the entire institution and not just for one faculty. 70% say digital learning is a strategic priority. And if you look at this little table that we provide there, it also confirms that this is not just the strategy, but that there is a shift, I would say, from responsibilities at faculty. And in 2014, we also had institutions where it was done by individual people towards a more institutionalized approach with central and faculty-based units working together, or a central unit who does the coordination. And we also have the feeling that this is very much the development, not just in parts of Europe, but across Europe. I mean, if you look there, I have a little extra box there on this strategy. I mean, if you say 12% have no strategy in place, this is not in one particular region. It's really across Europe, so a general trend. What is also interesting, compared to 2014, more institutions answer that they have included digitally enhanced learning now into their QA approaches, internal QA approaches. So this has more than doubled, which is positive. But looking at it from the other perspective, you could say there are still about half of the institutions which have not really worked out on how to quality assure it, on how to do that. But as you see, 41% of those say it is under discussion currently. Then what does that actually mean for teaching staff? So basically, most institutions provide support services for their teachers. It's 3/4 who do that, and you can see here it is with some variation. And it's also one of the priorities in the European Commission's Digital Education Action Plan, that they said digitally enhanced and confident teachers and education and training staff. So most institutions provide this kind of support. We are not sure at what condition that is. Often it is probably voluntarily, and it may not be sufficient for all teachers. As you can see, the lowest one is here actually the collaborative platforms for teachers. And generally on the learning, probably a point on the learning environments. Again, most of these questions we asked already in 2014. And there we were a bit surprised because there was no, or it's probably not so surprising, there was no real increase there. But the story is we probably asked the wrong questions, because already in 2014, the numbers were quite high. In 2020, they tend to be a little bit lower sometimes, with the exception of the personalized study portals. And I think one of the reasons for that is probably that institutions became aware of how fit for purpose or not fit for purpose some of these approaches were. And I picked up one of the findings here. If you look on online library access, there 90% say that they offer it. But then when we asked them about reactions to the COVID-19 crisis, 65% of those said that they actually enhanced online library access as an immediate reaction to the crisis. So of course, much more demand. But I think that is also true for some of the other capacities that institutions have for digitally enhanced learning, and certainly also for policies. So as you see here, another finding was that 75% actually plan to enhance their capacity, but also their policies. So any comments on that? Any perceptions? I start with Sandra then.
Okay, sorry, Alistair. I'll be short. Definitely, issue of libraries. The function has changed, and I'm not certain that all universities realized what to do with the libraries, actually. I'm very happy to see that some universities have done enormous advancement into organizing libraries as open study places, providing online access and everything. But we have to be aware that we have a number of campus-based universities, traditional universities, which still dominate the fact that libraries where you borrow books, which is not sufficient anymore, and they're difficult, taking time to change their perspective, how to support students. It's not so bad situation, but just want to mention that it's not so good as well. I would say that the learning environment as such, we have to think about it, because it's for the learning environment. It's not only the wireless access, the library, the online repository, but also the issue of culture. Because people, for example, take this example: student enrolled to the faculty, to the university. Their parents are sending them to the universities to study at the university, to go to the classroom every day with books and to study there. And okay, some students do have notebooks, iPads, but some do not have. They have only mobile phones. And for them, dominant and learning environment is sitting at a desk at learning, or going to the faculty and learning. And what we have when COVID started, we had the issue that students and teachers weren't prepared for the change of learning environment. They didn't know how to get around in the online environment. They didn't have technical possibilities, but not just this, but they also didn't know how to find information, how to get into the e-learning system, how to find the how to enroll into some application. That was a huge problem. They didn't know how to manage their concentration, how to focus online. So learning environment for me is very broad sense. And I think that at the moment we have this issue that we have to make change in the culture, that students and teachers are aware that learning environment is not going only to the classroom, sitting there and listening to the lecture, that learning environment can be different, and how to get around the online learning environment is skill. And we have to educate teachers and students for that. So it's not just what you said here in the numbers, but I think that's very important that we stress here. So Alistair, back to you.
Oh, perfect, Sandra. I mean, I think there's been several surveys up here in Scandinavia where they've shown that the students are actually fairly pleased with the online tuition they have received. The teaching works, the platforms, that's fine. But they're lonely. The social side has not happened. The teacher does a good job, but when the teacher's finished and closes the Zoom room, that's it. You're back in your little apartment and you're looking out the window. And, you don't have people to talk to in the corridor afterwards. You can't go to the cafe. Yes, the students can organize themselves a little bit, and some do, but many have been left completely alone. And we need to build in ways of getting that socializing is missing. The social university has disappeared, even for teachers. Another little point, just out of interest, is just the infrastructure of our tools, our platforms. In the Nordic region, we have a big agreement with Zoom. We have our own Zoom instance, which is completely administered and stored by us here. It doesn't go to the USA. It shot through the roof in the middle of March when suddenly the volume of Zoom users just went crazy. We then we pushed it up to 150,000 simultaneous participants, and that did well. But the start of this term, last week was it, we suddenly found the whole system was shuddering because we were getting 280,000 simultaneous participants in the system, and it couldn't cope. And we're building more, and that sort of infrastructure is really being put under pressure now.
Probably to follow up on that, I think that's clearly one of the outcomes of the crisis. I mean, we became aware that institutions are much more than just the places where you learn, but that there's this whole social environment, which is an important part of the learning, and probably also became much more of the home environments that students have, and sometimes that are not always very supportive. I mean, how are institutions dealing with that? I mean, currently at the crisis, but also how do you see that beyond? I mean, how can there be a more, also virtually, a better support to students? What would have to happen? Ulf.
This is a real big question. I mean, I think that in a way, from a, let's say, systemic point of view, what we have done when the crisis came is we have reinvented the entire system once. And the question I have is, did we invent it in a good way, so to speak? And directly related to your question, I would extend this question. Did we ask the students actually when we reinvented the system? And my hypothesis was no, we didn't, because we all had to cope actually. Yeah, we didn't shape a new system. Yeah, we didn't, so to speak, craft it like we wanted, but we had to cope with a sudden crisis. And we did, as a reflex, what we are good at, and that is pushing out knowledge. And we said, okay, that's what we can do online through the channels and tubes. We push out knowledge to our students, and that's it. And The question I really have is, where are those islands in each of your listeners' institutions where students are in these online moments asked to participate in developing the online environment in a new way which suits them, which is taking into account their preferences and wishes? We were very interested in exactly this point, yeah? And we were starting a conversation around which resulted in a podcast. The podcast is called next-normal.eu, next-normal.eu. And it's a podcast where now we have published 10 group discussions, 11 group discussions, and each group discussion is with a group of students of one other European country. So, and our attempt is we want to cover all the European country in a few months now. And one thing which is coming out there is that students in this crisis are also quite inventory. They are discovering that they have to learn themselves, that they have to do them, that the support is not there anymore, which they have. Yeah, and I'm wondering really if after this crisis, when we finally, yeah, I want that too. When we finally come back to the campus, do we meet new students there? Do we meet students who have learned new self-organization skills, which maybe we thought they didn't have before? Okay. And what do we do with that then? How is higher education benefiting from this kind of experiences? Because apart from just coping, it's also a productive way of dealing with it, what students have now. And I so wish that we could take that into account.
Okay, thanks. That's brings us to, I think, the next point. How will the situation actually look like post-crisis? And I think we prepared a poll there. Can we have the poll up? Thanks. So that's now over to you. I mean, I give you a few seconds to answer that. How will higher education in 2022 look like? Increased use of, that's our abbreviation, digitally enhanced learning and teaching compared to before the crisis. Increased use and more systematic strategic development of digitally enhanced learning. No big change in the immediate, but in the longer term. No significant change and not sure. Difficult to predict at this stage. So I just have to tell my colleagues here, I can't see the chat at all. So everything has disappeared. So I have really to rely on your assistance here. So Alison, if you could pull that up then.
Hi, everybody. Yes, for the results to the poll, you can actually just click on polls. So you've got chat, Q&A, and then polls. And if you look at closed, you will see the answers of the poll. So Michael, maybe I can just tell you.
Thanks.
So 60% is our winner, voting for increased use and more systematic strategic development of DELT. After that, 18% selected increased use of DELT compared to before the crisis. And then 12% said no big change in the immediate, but in the longer term. Then we had 7% who said not sure, difficult to predict at this stage. And then just 2% said no significant change.
So most people actually think it will have a significant change going out of the crisis. That's interesting. Probably I just move on and we discuss a little bit how you see the future. I mean, we have seen, as we showed in, that there is actually much more acceptance and more mainstream practices on digitally enhanced learning compared to some years ago. I mean, it's no major breakthrough, at least before the crisis, but gradual gains, I would have said, and we could have continued like this. But the question is really, how does now the experience change things? And I'm actually quite pleased now that so many people are relatively positive, or maybe it's not positive, they just say it changes, that it will be on whether the changes are actually positive, but that they think something will change. Because as we said already, there is also a feeling that many people just want to go back to the situation as it was before. And one question would be, has the crisis actually helped our digitally enhanced learning and teaching? As Ulf said before, we were all forced to use it, but do we actually like it? And is it not in a way branded now as an emergency mood, something that you do in the pandemic, but as soon as you can, you go back to the real thing, which brings with it all the support on campus, and which also brings all these social learning aspects in, which are where we are not yet sure on how to generate them online. So any views on that? Sandra?
Yeah, well, I think the answer is digital transformation, but depends how much we are going to dig into it. It's not. It's very nice to be optimistic looking at the results of the poll, but we as a people like to always go to find the easy way. It's going. Up the stream is rather hard than going down the stream. So there will be institutions that will get into it, and they have already started the process of digitalization and digital transformation. And, Michael, University of Rijeka in Croatia is on very good point for digital transformation. I'm very proud of them, how they have started things. But most of universities who weren't very much digitally oriented will try to get back to the situation it was before. Besides strategy, which is just a piece of paper if someone is not actually wanting to pursue that, you have to have people who have vision and the possibility to do these changes. When you're talking about public universities, sometimes, in the country, they do not have much competence between universities. Everyone today would like to enroll to the university because of the better jobs in the future, and they're not so driven for the need to make bigger changes. I would say that the biggest changes, for example, at Croatian universities after the March was purchase of Zoom. That was it. And they didn't find a necessity to do anything else beside that. And I think that this is not isolated situation. I always congratulate those universities who are doing better and have a vision and who has really done good things. But that's reality. And I think that it's very good that the European Commission has said that this Digital Education Action Plan, which is emphasized once again that digital technologies are necessary, and it's not just something you would like or not like. But what can I say when my Minister for Education just recently said online learning is just substitute for face-to-face teaching and learning. So we need people who will understand what we have to do in order to get us into future. Also, it's very important that the environment is also positive about that. If we have parents, the teachers, the community who are not so much engaged and understanding what they want, what is digitalization and digital transformation, then it will be very difficult. And I can just say for the Croatia, everyone knows the best about football and teaching and learning. They're all experts in these two things. I hope that all those Croatians who are listening this will not be angry with me, but that's true. everybody knows the best about education and football. Well, we are very good at football, so I hope they are very, very good in education as well. But we have to use the possibilities the European Commission are giving us, especially this hub, which is going to start, and to learn from others, not to find the new solutions from the beginning, which are already existing, but to learn from others, to collaborate. The communities of practice are very important, and we have to move on. We have to move on, because if we stay where we are at the moment, we will ruin our future.
Okay. I think that was actually also confirmed in the study. I mean, this learning from others, and also very practically in a lot of exchanges that we saw during the crisis between universities. But what you describe is, you say, not everybody will embrace the lessons learned and develop them further. We probably have a much more diversified picture. I saw Alistair nodding. So that's about the way how you would see that.
No, I get asked to talk a lot about the future, and I wrote, "The future ain't what it used to be." I used to be. At the moment, it's like anything can happen and probably will. It's impossible to see what this is what's going to come next, because we have no idea. I have many friends from Arab countries, and one of the many phrases I start using my own speech is "Inshallah," meaning if God wills it. And whether you believe in deities or not, I think it's quite appropriate, because just about everything we say about the future is that we don't know. It's not in our hands. We'll see what happens. We need to develop a resilience, and we need to develop the ability to deal with the problems that we are facing. And digital technologies give us an awful lot of opportunities. They also lead us into rather dangerous avenues, which we have to be aware of. We should not throw the baby out with the bathwater. There is a lot to be said about traditional methods. We should not be just throwing everything out the door. It's not sort of a rush to digitalization that will solve all our problems. It's in our heads. That's where we need to. It's attitudes rather than technology that need to change, and traditions need to be changed and questioned. The answer is not always technology, but it is always people.
Yeah, that I think came out very clearly, and that is also what you will read in the report. It's actually not the challenges come not from the technology. It's about getting the students and the staff on board, of having a committed leadership, and building basically your digital environment that supports the mission of your institution. We are already over time. Thanks to all of you for being here with us, and thanks to my colleagues here, Sandra, Ulf, Alistair. Thanks so much. I think that was a great session. I think we have another, oops, sorry, that I skipped. We didn't manage that. But what I just wanted to advertise here is that in just 2 weeks, we have the next European Learning and Teaching Forum upcoming, and embedding and facilitating sustainability. Another topic, of course, that links very well to the situation in which we find ourselves at the moment. Registration is still open, so a good chance to meet you there. And of course, it's an online event. Thanks so much for today, and see you around. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, everybody. Bye.
Bye.